Hello YouTube. Well, they say everything has a season, and with regard to motorcycling, how many more years do you plan on riding your motorcycle? I got to thinking about this because the other day my wife said that when I turned 60 in a couple of years, she expected me to stop riding and sell all my motorcycles. I don't know where she came up with that idea. I mean, sometimes she just likes to mess with me, but I told her I'd be the one to decide when to stop riding. But it did get me to thinking, what would cause me to stop riding? I love riding. I ride year-round, even though I live in the central U.S. where the winters are often pretty rough. But if you look at the demographics as they stand right now, here's some statistics from a recently published article. In 2018, the median age of a motorcyclist was 50. We know the younger folks just aren't getting into motorcycling for a variety of reasons. The current age range of the millennial generation is 23 to 39. A lot of those people didn't get into motorcycling. I mean, they got whammied with the 2008-2009 recession, and now what's currently going on was certainly a damper for that age group to have enough disposable income to start riding or buy a more expensive motorcycle. I've got children in that age bracket. My oldest son even has a motorcycle, but I think if he was being honest with me, he would tell me that he actually prefers to play video games to riding motorcycles for the most part. And if he had to choose between the two, he'd sell his bike and keep his game system. So there's obviously some generational differences, but given this situation, I think a lot of us in the next few years will be pondering that question, and not from a negative standpoint, but I think if you realize that maybe you don't have that many more years left to ride, it makes your current riding that much more enjoyable and makes you more inclined to ride every chance you get. But in terms of what would actually make a person stop riding a motorcycle, I think it boils down to two main categories. One is physical ability, and then the second is just how much do you enjoy it. So physical ability could have to do with tolerance to heat and cold, which changes as you age, stamina on long trips, your eyesight, especially night vision, and just overall physical strength. And this isn't to become obsessed with the aging process. Clint Eastwood was asked a few years ago how he could continue making movies as he approached his 90th year in age, and he said, "Don't let the old man in." But there's also some reality that has to intrude here so that you can better manage what some of your limitations may be. For example, the night vision thing. Avoid riding at night if that's an issue, but it doesn't mean you have to stop riding it altogether. Back in the 90s, I was on a motorcycle trip out west, and I came across a couple. They looked to be around the early 70s in age, and they were riding two up on a Goldwing, and chatted with them a minute, and then the husband went in to pay for the gas, and I commented to his wife how much he seemed to really love riding his Goldwing. She said that was true, but that this was probably going to be their last trip before selling the bike. She explained that her husband had lost a lot of leg strength over the years and had accidentally dropped the bike in several parking lots over the last year or two. And the bike was so heavy, this Goldwing, well over 800 pounds, he had to get help from people standing around to get the bike back up, which really embarrassed him. So, if that starts to happen and you're used to riding two up or going on long trips, I think a good option would be to extend your riding time is going with a three-wheeler. Whether it's a Harley Tri-Glide or something of that sort, or a Can-Am Spyder. I mean, it's no secret that Harley is chasing that older demographic for their very last motorcycle dollar, and I think for MSRP that the Tri-Glide is the most expensive Harley that they sell, the CVO version, at around $43,000. So certainly it provides comfort and for two-up riding and long trips. But if you're more inclined like me to ride solo, you could go with a smaller bike that would be easier to handle around town, like a 650 Vulcan. I mentioned this to a guy at a motorcycle dealership the other day, and he said, yeah, he wished more people would think that way. It doesn't even occur to a lot of folks that they could just downsize their bike and still get a number of years of additional enjoyment out of riding. But, it certainly things that affect your enjoyment for riding have to be factored in. I mean, for example, the amount of traffic in your area. I mean, I moved into a new part of town about 10 years ago when there was hardly any traffic. Now there's just a ton of traffic, and it seems like I got to stop every 100 yards at a stoplight. So I do most of my riding out of that area. But, for example, the highways in Houston or Dallas, I don't even understand how people could ride a motorcycle, and to me, it's like a meat grinder. I remember riding on the 101 freeway in Los Angeles. I think at that time it was in the early 90s or something, like 8 or 9 lanes going 75 miles an hour plus. I rode my motorcycle out there, and it was one and done. I was never going to do that again. It was pretty intense. It reminds me of that Bowfinger movie where Eddie Murphy's trying to run across the highway. But the other thing that might affect your enjoyment is, do you ride two-up or are you used to riding two-up? I went on a motorcycle trip on a multistrada. My wife was riding in the passenger seat behind me, and combination of circumstances, we ended up riding 700 miles in a 24-hour period, and that seat is not made for that kind of distance in a short period of time. And she was so uncomfortable, she refused to get on another motorcycle for a couple of years. So you could have a partner that you're used to riding with that just can't or won't ride anymore. That affects your enjoyment. Or if you're used to riding in a group setting, maybe your group has disbanded. So these are things that might affect your decision to continue riding. Ironic thing about getting older is you often have more time, but if you're in a retirement situation on a fixed income, it might be hard to continue riding. You need to get a new bike. I knew this guy that was about 72, and he was on an old Harley Dyna, and he wanted to get a new Indian Chief, and his wife just wouldn't let him. So when that Dyna wore out, that was going to be it for him. The other thing that might happen to people that would make them decide to stop riding is if they had an near miss or accident, and not that in of itself would be an issue, but if it caused the person to rethink the cause of that near miss or accident, if it was related to a decline in riding ability, that kind of honest assessment is important to decide, if it really is appropriate to continue riding. About 3 years ago, I had abdominal surgery to fix a hernia repair, and at my 1-month follow-up after the surgery, I asked the surgeon, when do you think I can start riding my motorcycle again? And he looked at me like, are you kidding me? I mean, I don't think he'd been in practice for about 40 years as a surgeon, and I don't think he'd ever had that question before. So I just had to use my own judgment. I waited a couple months and was very careful, extra careful. But I really enjoyed riding, and being able to look forward to riding again is what helped me get through a lot of the pain of the healing process. But, life's really about managing risks and not avoiding them, so I plan on riding as long as I can. I'd be curious with you all, what's the oldest rider you've encountered? How long do you plan to ride? Please let me know in the comments section, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.